Welcome to another episode of a very good social media podcast. I am your host, Zach Elia. Let's get into it. So this episode, I am super stoked about, bringing on Scott Kegley, the VP of Digital Strategy for AMB Sports Entertainment. So that's Mercedes-Benz Stadium, the Atlanta Falcons, Atlanta FC or Atlanta United FC, and a professional golf team. So having him on and learning from just all of the knowledge he has, like he's been in the industry for 18 years. He mentioned starting the 49ers Instagram account on an iPod Touch all those years ago. So, and still to this day, it is part of, the teams and the organizations that you look to for inspiration, and the ones that it's like, oh, this amazing thing happened on social. Who did it? It was the Vikings, it was the Falcons. So getting to learn about his journey and all the different roles that he's had. And then on top of that, his advice for leaders who are kind of taking that next jump, being in a leadership position for as long as he has, and hiring from those positions and the advice he has to the next generation. So this episode is one that I definitely will never forget, and really excited for you to see what's going on. But without further ado, I'd like to welcome Scott Kegley to the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's good to be on, kind of in the nascency of this podcast.
Definitely, man. Well, it's an honor to have you here. It's, we were just talking a little bit about it, but it's I don't know that we've crossed paths, not purposely, but I don't know that we've crossed paths enough to kind of pick each other's brains, but it's always been, mutual admiration and definitely admiration from afar, and watching what you were able to do with, the Niners, the Vikings, now, the Falcons and that group over there. It's just been every time I see something really cool on social, it's like, oh, yeah, I know who's kind of leading the charge over there.
Oh, well, I appreciate it, but I've obviously followed you over your career and have loved the times that we have been able to kind of rub elbows and chat a little bit. So thanks for having me on. This is really cool, and I love what you're doing with this.
I appreciate it, man. Well, let's just get right into it. Starting at USC for undergrad, and going all the way to today with your role with AMB Sports Entertainment. I read on your LinkedIn profile it was 18 years experience, led digital for 3 NFL franchises, 1 MLS franchise, a golf team, and 3 premier stadiums. So that in itself is a hell of a resume, to say the least. So, I mean, just take us through from, as early as you want to start to, when you realized this was a career, and kind of how you made it along the way.
Yeah, I don't know how long do you got here? I've been doing this for a little while now, so things have kind of changed over the course of my career, which makes me one feel old, but two, it's really cool time to have kind of been involved in the digital and social space. But yeah, like you said, I went to school down at USC, majored in broadcast journalism. That was always kind of what I wanted to do. I wanted to be the guy on Sports Center. I knew I wanted to have some sort of career in sports. And when I was at USC, I worked for our football team, and then I worked for Annenberg TV News, which was kind of our campus TV station. So my senior year, actually, I was working 60 hours a week, between 20 hours a week as an executive producer for the TV station, and then 40 hours a week, in quotes, for the football team. That was kind of an athletic department as a whole. We did a lot of work for basketball and things like that as well. So wore a lot of different hats, but kind of having that experience made me realize that I really wanted to be on the team side. Give kind of the nickel recap, but yeah, I applied to just about every team on kind of the West Coast. So I grew up in Sacramento, and so at that time I kind of wanted to stay semi close to home, because entry level positions in sports, if I needed to go home and rely on the parents for some help, there they were. And so I got calls back from the Raiders and the 49ers, and I actually interviewed with them on the same day. Drove from Sacramento down to Oakland, interviewed with them, had a very good interview it was Chris Gargano was running the show. there. He went to the San Francisco Giants and then the New York Jets, and has been really somebody I've kept in touch with, even though I never ended up working with the Raiders. But fantastic, fantastic guy, and definitely played a huge role, just kind of giving me some good advice towards the start of my career, and then ultimately ended up taking the position with the 49ers as a website video intern was my first title, and I reported to our internet services manager. That was my boss. That was in 2006. So I always love going back and kind of revisiting titles and how we thought about the internet. And so I kind of did a lot of different things there. Oh, one thing that I should say too, I technically, there wasn't a job for the Niners when I applied, and there wasn't a job with the Raiders when I applied. Like I got a bunch of USC letterhead. Pete Carroll wrote my letter of recommendation. I
Nice.
had a demo reel. I tried to make it look as fancy as possible. And at the Niners, I actually sent it to the wrong person. And then they ended up passing it along to the right person, their internet services manager, and ultimately got called in. But I think one of the big reasons I got the job was we did a program at USC called Matt and Reggie TV with Leinart and Bush. And so it's just kind of lifestyle stuff that we did for USCTrojans.com. And they said, we want you to do player videos. And so I showed up as the first day of training camp, player check-in day. They said, hey, here's Anthony Adams and Mike Adams. And of course, if you know Anthony Adams, Spice Adams, Cream Bigums. He's gone on to do some amazing, amazing things. And I love Spice. But I had to do a hotel room check-in locker room tour. That was, the first day. So anyways, long story short, kind of started working my way up I wrote for the website, started updating our website. I even spent about a year and a half sending out our email communications. In 2009, I think, it was like, hey, why aren't we on social media? My boss had left. It's kind of like an interim time for us as we filled the position. We were out at the combine. And that was when Instagram, actually, this was a few years later, but we started Twitter initially, but then a few years later, Instagram was only on iPhones. And the only thing that we had in the company, this dates me so much, were Androids. And so I was like, gosh, this is terrible. I have an Android. We're the San Francisco 49ers. We're in Silicon Valley. So I had my personal iPod Touch. And when we were out at the combine, I logged on to Wi-Fi because that's how you had to do it. And so we started our Instagram account, and thankfully we got back, and like the follower growth was insane. And so they were like, okay, you can have an iPhone. So I claim, I think this is accurate. I think I was the first person at the San Francisco 49ers with an iPhone. So all by kind of breaking the rules and starting an account on an iPod Touch. Those first posts weren't the best, but they were what they were. And and so anyways, was there for 9 years, really grew and developed our digital team, and opportunity came up in Minnesota after we had opened Levi's Stadium, and I decided I wanted to be a masochist and go through a stadium opening again. So I was in Minnesota, and they said, hey, you did this in 9 years in San Francisco. Can you do this in a year and kind of build our team and grow our team so we're ready for the stadium opening, as we were kind of like evolving kind of the digital media group there and putting it under a group called Vikings Entertainment Network, and was there for 7 seasons. And then opportunity came up here in Atlanta. I always say, like, none of these positions I kind of applied for, just started like talking to people, and then kind of one thing led to the next. But with AMB Sports and Entertainment, which is the Falcons, United, Mercedes-Benz Stadium, and now we added Atlanta Drive GC and the TGL. And so it's an opportunity to oversee digital across those properties. TGL wasn't a thing at that point, but has become one. And so anyways, now got to work outside the NFL a little bit too, and kind of see how the sausage is made in the MLS and work with those groups, and also kind of the events at Mercedes-Benz Stadium too. So I hope I didn't like bore anybody, but try to get through that as quickly as I could. Probably skipped over a few details.
For sure, man. Well, I think starting the Niners Instagram account on an iPod Touch, I think that's a pretty solid claim to fame, to say the least.
Yeah, it was wild times back in the day. We just kind of said, when we started those accounts, you're kind of just throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. Like there's no playbook. There kind of still is no playbook. I feel like at least now there are classes in this. That wasn't a thing when I was coming through school. And so we really had to kind of figure it out on the fly, and kind of coming from a journalism background and storytelling background, um, kind of looked at the content that we put up on the website, and kind of similarly what we were doing on social, right? Like at the end of the day, for storytelling, doesn't matter whether it's a 6-second vine or a 60-minute video. Ultimately, like we treat everything with the same amount of reverence in terms of its impact on the customer. So
Well, and at the same time, like it's those funnels. Like no matter when you're creating content, it's like you have those funnels of, hey, we have a staff writer who is writing this stuff. Like, how do we
mhm,
package that in a way that speaks to someone on TikTok? Like we have this massive video series on YouTube. How do we repurpose pieces of that, put it on TikTok, put it
mhm,
on Instagram, put it different places? So it's always interesting to hear because I mean, like my claim to fame back in 2015, probably 2016 was, I started the Steelers Snapchat account and I started the Steelers Musically account that then became their TikTok account. But it's like, it's, it's interesting how no matter when and what platform it is, like,
mhm.
I remember every team signing up for Be Real when that started and everyone's holding their names and trying to figure that out. And now it's Threads. And it's like, it's funny that it's really no different than, when you started Instagram on an iPod Touch to us starting, the Pirates Threads account. And it's like, again, it's like we have all these different content funnels and things are a little bit more developed than they were when I first started, but it's still like it's trial and error. It's like there's no perfect formula that says, oh, we learned this for all these other platforms. It'll work here because it's like it never does, sadly. And
Yeah, and anybody who says they have it figured out is probably lying. At the end of the day, I feel like we're all learning from each other so much. And the hard part about what we do is there's so many different inputs and outputs, right? Like there's like what's your number one KPI on social media? Like what name one,
right,
like pick what, like you literally can't pick one. We have competing
exactly.
priorities across a whole different bunch of verticals. There are certain like key indicators and things like that that we can look at, for success and engagement rate and video views and things like that are ones that we've kind of prioritized. But ultimately, like, are we driving traffic to the website? Are we generating revenue from digital? Are we helping amplify some of our community relations initiatives? Like, for example, there's a 50-50 raffle that we're doing with the Saints to benefit ALS research. Like, that is now like a priority. And it doesn't necessarily show up in NFL social media rankings, but those are things that we have to prioritize because they're a key part of what we do as a business. So I think it's just trying to encapsulate everything that the business is trying to accomplish. And ultimately, we're kind of the end component to that. Like we talk a lot about like publish with purpose. Like think about what the end result is going to be at the very front, like kind of ideation stage of whatever that may be. And that can ultimately lead to success, and make sure you're just optimizing it to ultimately have the best engagement you possibly can on it.
For sure. And I mean, like earlier in my career, I wish I would have understood some of this stuff a little bit better, but it's like the goal of every post is not how many retweets can we get? How, you know what I mean? Like it's there's so many different things, like you said, that go into every single post. And it's like, okay, yes, this maybe isn't going to be our top performing thing from an engagement standpoint, but it's important story to tell that we need to get out there in the world and make sure that the right people see it. And so it's something, that I've learned and something that I probably should have learned a lot earlier in my career, but it's like it's not always, we got 1,000 retweets. That was a success. It's like, well, this other post that maybe had 10 did more for our business lines than, the viral tweet that went crazy.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the cool parts. Like for me, that's one of the really unique parts about what we do, and one of the things that I kind of love so much. There's so many parts of the organization that we get to work with. Like it kind of takes a while to, figure it out and kind of navigate and make sure that you're working with every department kind of like as good as you possibly can, and building those relationships. And one of the things when I started in Atlanta, we had three people on the social media team, and maybe it's because of me, but right before I started, everybody left. No, but a couple people kind of had to leave for some various reasons, and we had to rebuild our staff from scratch. So imagine going into training camp and everybody's new. We had two people who started literally a week before training camp, and my first game I went on the road as a preseason game at Detroit. And Zach, I've never been more nervous for a game in my life than that, because it's literally like our whole team, a few people who had been there, together for about a year on our editorial side, and our video staff had been together for a while, but the social team was brand new. A lot of the folks on our creative team who are fantastic, a lot of them had either this was kind of football season, kind of number one, or at least we hadn't all worked together. I know Jackson Sipes too from Arizona, and so kind of was like really leaning on him and our creative director Larry Luke, who's fantastic. But we had to kind of figure it all out together a little bit, and you don't want to just rinse and repeat some of the things that you've done in the past, but really figure it out together, and kind of what the Atlanta Falcons voice, tone, look is going to be. And anyways, we made it through that game, thankfully, not without a few bumps in the road, but it's been great to see kind of just that growth of that team. But whole point of that story, you start and you have three brand new people in a very high touch group, and social. And so that just takes a little while to build. And I really feel like this season, kind of started to hit our stride in a couple of areas. So, which was nice to see. And super talented people across the board.
Yeah. Well, it's you probably saw my grin that whole time. You are preaching to the choir, because I literally, when I showed up in Pittsburgh for the Pirates a year and a half ago, I walked into the best social team that I had ever worked with up until
Mhm.
that point, and the blessing and the curse of that was they were both ready for the next thing as I got there. So it was like I got to work with them and learn from them for, 6 months, and then spring training rolled around and it was me covering every single game again, where it's like I was finally able to step back and not be, the one covering games and live tweeting and things like that. So it was like that whole story you're telling, it was exactly the same. It was, being able to sit back and say, I've always been able to hire, a missing piece, or
Mhm.
someone takes another opportunity and you can tweak something a little bit to kind of better fit your goals and what you're trying to do. But I'd never been able to have, this blank slate of like, if you were able to build a team, what would they look like? And then, being able to piece those people together and bring in such an incredible group. And, my team has really come together and they bring so many good ideas to the table, such good energy. And it's been a lot of work. And I think, like you said, it takes a while to kind of get your stride. And, I always say it's like, it's basically you need a year to be able to, like, once you've gone through everything you can go through schedule wise, then you kind of feel like, okay, well, now I'm a little bit more prepared for the unexpected because I know what's coming a little bit better.
Yeah, as our team was kind of, and maybe you can relate to this too, but just having some of the conversations with our social crew, as we kind of got up to speed and things like that last year. I just equated it to like, okay, you played sports, like most folks who work in sports have played sports at some point. And so ultimately, you join a basketball team, right? It takes a while before there's a no look pass. Like you don't just know, I don't know that Zach's just wide open on the wing. Like I have to I have to go through that with you a couple of times. Like we have to develop that chemistry to kind of know that you're going to be there and like what you're thinking. And I'd kind of developed that a little bit in Minnesota, and you talked about kind of being able to build the team. There was a couple folks on those teams that I had inherited who were great. Excuse me. But a lot of them too, I was able to bring on. And so it's like when we left, like that was kind of like almost the hardest part is like looking around. And it's like such an overused term, but like family, like of all the accomplishments in that we had in Minnesota as a group, like I don't look at it and say like, hey, we won this award or that award, or we were able to do this really cool campaign. The most important things to me are the people. Like at the end of the day, the development of folks, where they're at, maybe even in other places. We have somebody who's an AD at Rutgers, which is great. From our digital team that's moved on to do great things. I know you've had Felicia on the podcast, and Eric Stark runs Slate, and was able to work with him and Mike Horton also from Slate. They were on my team in San Francisco. Like that's so cool. Just to be able to see kind of their personal growth and development. So of all the things that we do, like ultimately, if we're able to help people build careers and really kind of find their niche in this, crazy industry, that's ultimately like kind of at the end of the day, I think what I enjoyed the most about my time in San Francisco and Minnesota, kind of looking back on it.
Yeah. No, and it makes total sense. And like the more leadership positions I have, and like that was kind of a tough transition for me going
Hmm.
from being the doer and someone who, boots on the ground, hand in everything, graphics, video, everything I
Hmm.
could basically do, to then now like you don't do all the stuff that you're good at. You help others get to where they want to
Yep.
go. And it was, I don't think I was the best leader with the Cardinals. I think I was still a little bit too attached to, the doing and the
Hmm.
this is how we should do it, so do it my way, rather than like let's talk and figure this out. I'm sure Jackson could probably vouch for that, but now it's like the more, leadership training and books you read and research you do, it's like it's so much more about, why do you want to be a leader? And that was like back when I first got my first director role, it was very much like I always wanted to be a director, but it was
Hmm.
but the why was like, well, because so I can have more responsibility, so I can make more money. It was never like, well, great, that's awesome, but like now you're in charge of other people's
Hmm.
careers. And like, so looking back and looking forward, it's like just like you said, the reason I enjoy leading and being a leader is because I want the people underneath me to succeed and grow and flourish and, learn. And that's so much more important to me than any, meme or anything that we could put out and get attention from.
Yeah, kind of like the buzzwords like individual contributor, and you can be a really good individual contributor, but I'll take a little bit less on individual contributions if you're somebody who makes everybody around you better. Like those are the people that you want to be on your team. And if you have 10 folks on your team and you're 10 out of 10, like that team's going to be unstoppable. And when you get like kind of some crazy moments and things like that, like thrown your way, that's a team that's going to be able to roll like with the punches the best and communicate the best and have each other's backs. So yeah, I completely agree. And I think, part of the role that, we have now is like, how do you take care of the things behind the team that can just let the creators create? Like, I want you to worry about like making good content. Like, I'll worry about the rest of the stuff. And if something's driving you nuts, like, let me know, vent up, and let's see how we can kind of fix it together and find a solution.
Yeah, definitely. Well, on that same note, this is something I've asked quite a few people on this pod so far, but when I went from coordinator to director, it was a lot more responsibility, of course, and there was a lot more to it. But the biggest jump was, like I said, it was going from being a very good doer to now
Yeah.
like, okay, well, everything that you're good at, don't do that anymore. You have to do something completely different. And that was it was
Hmm.
such a hard transition to figure out and, let go of things and, kind of move your whole role into a different space. So, going back in time and I wish I was able to talk to you when I was going going into that role, but like what advice would you have for, someone who's going into their first leadership position on
Mhm.
something like, something I wish I would have known when I got into that spot, but, that person who's really taking that next step in their
Mhm.
career, what's something that would help them in that journey?
Yeah, I feel like you start to get just judged less and less about like what you are specifically doing for the organization, but it's your team. Like I think that that's kind of the biggest change, how you can kind of let some things go. I remember the first time like I wasn't the person posting to Instagram exclusively. And I just had a little bit of like trepidation about that. And I think you have to like just let go and know that it's not going to be exactly how you would do it. And like that's fine. Um, but you really want people to be able to formulate kind of their own opinions and they're like you said it earlier, like people that we learn from, like you learn from your managers, you learn from people on your team, you learn from your peers. I think when you can kind of create that environment where everybody's kind of learning together. Like one of the things we kind of try to do is like you look around and you say like, okay, why was this project successful? Was it because of Zach? Was it because of Scott? Like, hopefully there's like 10 people that you can name that had fingerprints on it. And usually those are the projects that you look back on that you're like, that was a heck of a lot of fun to be a part of.
Yeah, for sure. And you brought up a great point too, is like, and that was something that I struggled with was just because this is not the way I would do it doesn't mean that it's incorrect or wrong. And that's something that I've learned a lot from, that experience and continuing to grow is like when you bring talented people in and you're relying on them to do, the things that they're good at, you can't put them in this, little box that you think
Mhm.
they should fit into. You need to let them spread their wings and really take what you're doing to a better place. Like if I was still the best at all of this stuff, what's the team going to do?
Mhm.
Just assist, the main guy, which is not how a team works. It's not like one guy, like going back to basketball, it's like it's not one guy out there that's getting the ball every single play that the whole offense is running through, or the defense is going to figure
Mhm.
that out pretty quickly. So it's like it's very much how can you, like you said, empower the people with you to bring the whole team
Yeah.
up rather than just, like you said, one person being, responsible for this stuff.
Yeah, and I think it's important too. Again, back to like advice for the first time kind of managers. Anytime too, I've had somebody kind of move into that role, their manager is also responsible for that person's development. Because that's new to them too. So it's not like, hey Zach, you got to learn how to be a manager. You now got three people underneath you. Like, I don't know, what's the deal, man? Why aren't you getting it? It's ultimately on the person above them to coach them up a little bit. In one-on-ones, if you're just talking about like tactical things all the time, like, okay, hey, where are we with this? Where are we with that? Like, give me an update here. That's not what they should be about. They should be about coaching. They should be about growth and development. They should be about like kind of some of the key issues that you might be having, right? Like those are the things that you should spend your time on. So sometimes too, even when like first time managers might not necessarily be super successful, their manager owns some of that responsibility too. Like, not that they have to just, it's only on them. Like, of course, like you're accountable for yourself and your own actions and your own development too. But management above that person is super, super key. Like, that's leadership. You need good leadership and across the entire organization in order for everyone to kind of be successful within that specific vertical.
All right. Well, one of the things that wasn't necessarily jarring, but it was definitely eye-opening when I moved from Pittsburgh Steelers, Arizona Cardinals. It was, the same sport, the same league, but like we talked about, I think earlier was like what worked for the Steelers wasn't going to work for the Cardinals. So going from, the Niners to the Vikings to now the Falcons, like what has been, what is that process for you when it's like it's not just rinse and repeat. Like you're not doing the same things that you did with the Niners, that you did with the Vikings, that you do with the Falcons. It's like you have to learn the fan base and learn that type of content and what you're trying to do. So, just maybe take me through that process for you and how it kind of worked out.
Yeah, I mean, first we do it differently in Atlanta than we did in Minnesota than we did in San Francisco. We also have very different strengths and weaknesses as a team. Um, and you want to be able to set those teams kind of up for success, right? Like there's certain things that are important to each organization. So it's kind of understanding that initially. With Atlanta, it's multiple teams within the same organization too, which that's very different. I can say like one thing that helped at every organization. Like I've worked for three very good organizations with great leadership and great ownership with Jed York and Mark Wilf and Arthur Blank. Um, it really is top down. And so ultimately being able to have the resources to be successful and be supportive, when I went from Minnesota to Atlanta, I was going from one really good organization to another really good organization. Um, that being said, it's just kind of navigating the nuances is within it from like kind of a brand voice perspective. Like that takes a little bit of time. And I'm not from Atlanta. I grew up in Sacramento. I'm from the West Coast, but I was also had never lived outside of California before I moved to Minnesota. So I had to buy some jackets first. But also just kind of learn about the city. Like one of the things that I've done in both places is just listen to a lot of sports talk radio when I get in because like I really just want to understand the culture, and a lot of that good and bad kind of bleeds through sports talk radio. But those are really good things to understand. So you also want to listen to your flagship and listen to the folks who are carrying Falcons games and United games and things like that, just to be able to see what they're saying about the team. That's really important. But then also too, rely on the folks who have been there for a lot longer than you have. Our VP of marketing for the Falcons grew up here and grew up rooting for the team. Like he's a great resource in terms of what's going to work for our fan base. Our creative director, Larry, has been, with the organization or in the city of Atlanta for a long time too, and he understands Atlanta culture. And so to be able to, I've been here a year and a half, right? Like it's I'm still kind of learning. And some of these things that we go through together in different campaigns and seeing how fans respond and kind of the Sundays campaign that we've grown and kind of started to like take that to like different levels. Now in 2 years, like you just kind of learn by doing. And it takes a while. And anybody who says like, oh, just, kind of read a book on like the history of the team, like sure, I guess. I don't know. I mean, a lot of the things, if you're a sports fan, you just kind of like can know a little bit about the team, but it's the culture and the community that's the most important, and that you're not going to learn in a day.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and that was I talked to Noah Lau, who's content producer with the Brooklyn Nets, and I was a
Hmm.
fan of his when he worked with the Phoenix Suns. And again, like going from, he's from Arizona, moving to, Brooklyn across the country, same league, different teams, completely different fan bases. And one of the things he said was like, I got into biking and I just got out into the city and like
Hmm.
really saw like what the city was all about and how things are done in Brooklyn that are different than anywhere else. And so it's like that's one of the main things that like me being from Pittsburgh, that's an advantage I have over anyone
Yeah.
who's not, is because I grew up, wearing black and gold. I grew up and know the history of the team, but know it from a fan instead of, like you said, from a history book. So it's always interesting to hear. It's like I don't know that there's one proper way to do anything really in this industry, but that was really, aside from the leadership thing, that was such a big, eye-opening experience. Was like something, I did with the Steelers, we'd do with the Cardinals, and it would get way less interaction because it just wasn't, that's not the fan base. Like yes, it's the
Hmm.
same sport, it's the same league, but it's like the fan bases are so different, and it's like it's just getting into that and understanding it is so crazy.
It is fun though. You get to kind of reinvent yourself a bit. It's kind of like actors taking on new roles, right? And it's like you talk to people who are kind of in that field. And like they generally get kind of a rush out of, kind of becoming someone else, right? Like it is really fun. And I think there are some parallels there too to like kind of embracing kind of a different fan base and a different community, different culture, different city, different location. Like I've worked on the West Coast, in the North in Minnesota, and now in the South. So I've kind of gone very like each city very different culturally. But that part of it is really fun. And it's really like one of the things that I like the best is just being able to actually meet the fans at different events. It's kind of also why I'm kind of so passionate about some of the international expansion and growth and things like that that I did in Minnesota as well as now here in Atlanta. We were able to successfully bid on marketing rights in Germany, but going out there and then like talking to some of the German fans, and some of them came out here, and I met up with some of them. And I think it's a really good opportunity to kind of, my expression is like surveys of one. So you kind of go out and, hey, I can get a whole bunch of data from 100 people that take a survey. And okay, great. That gives me like a little bit of a smattering. Or I can go really, really in depth with one person and I can ask them every question that I want to know and follow up questions and really dig in and see like how some of the things are kind of resonating with our fan base. And so whether that's folks locally, folks internationally, I just think like take advantage of those like surveys of one, so to speak, when those opportunities arise.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Well, so transitioning a little bit to kind of the content side and, things that jump out to me, I remember with the Vikings, like a claymation Viking series that you guys did that was so amazing and we were jealous of every time you posted it. The Minnesota Miracle being a part of that, like this stuff with the Falcons this year where it's like, the shots from the ceiling,
Mhm.
the mascot jumping down on bungee cords, Ludacris with his 360 can, like one of those or something that I didn't mention. Just like take me through kind of the thought process when you're, I guess, like pushing the boundaries of what everyone else is doing because everyone's looking for inspiration. Everyone's looking at all of the other teams in their league, plus, all the NBA teams, all the MLB teams, all the NHL, like, Real Madrid, Manchester United. Everybody's looking for that inspiration, but it's like there are very few teams who are that trailblazer, who are ahead of the curve when it comes to this stuff. And, I just always am curious of like, the Vikings were one, the Carolina Panthers were another. And it was like every time, and now the Falcons, like every time you guys post something, it was like, man, like why didn't we think of that? And so it's like, I don't know if there's some special formula that you guys have. Please don't share it on this, but like how how do you manage to stay ahead of the game rather than kind of like looking to others and emulating basically?
Yeah, well, first, I appreciate you saying that. It's very nice. I think that, and I guess I'll use the kind of the claymation kind of example. Um, and this is when Vine came out. And so there was just a lot of kind of seeing what every other team was kind of doing. And it would be 6 seconds, team takes the field, 6 seconds, huddle breakdown, 6 seconds of like a receiver catching a pass on the sideline. And it's just like you look at what everybody else was doing on the platform. And the reason that I loved that platform was it was literally like magic. And so there were people, and you look at like TikTok now and kind of like some of the stuff that Zach King is doing, right? Like we looked and I was like, who's the best? I literally Googled. I was like, best Vine artist in the Bay Area. Cause I was like, who's doing this the best, right? And so I found somebody, his name's Ian Padgham. We're still friends all these years later. And for some reason, he continued to work with me in Minnesota. But we kind of experimented with some stop motion stuff in kind of one playoff run with kind of a different creator that was kind of through a company. So we posted it, and I remember it might have been Darren Ravel responded, and he said, "Oh, this is amazing! Haha, the 40 Viners," or somebody like maybe he posted it in a comment back from a fan. Anyways, 40 Viners came out, and I was like, "Oh my God, like this is gold." I was like, we literally have to do something with this. And so I Googled, best Vine artists in the Bay Area, and I found Ian. And so we drove up to San Francisco in the 49ers wrapped vehicle. Me and Eric Stark was actually with me. And we went and we talked to Ian. He's like, hey, I'm an artist and I don't know like a ton about football, but this sounds interesting because I'm like, I want to take what you're doing and like, what if we were the first sports team to do this on Vine? And he's like, okay, well, that'd be kind of cool. Like, love it, love what you're pitching. And it's like, okay, cool idea. We need to work with this guy. We know we have to work with this guy. We all think we're creative, and then you meet Ian, and you're like, dude, he is creative. And I remember we had some folks from Levi's that were on site at the 49ers offices. And my boss, and I did not know that they were there at the time, but my boss calls me and I was kind of in a different building. And he's like, oh, hey, can you come down here? I want you to kind of take us through this Vine idea. I was like, okay. And so I hung up and I kind of like ran down there. And he's like, go quick. So I come in and I open the door. I'm like a little bit out of breath because like some of the buildings are spread out there. And so I think he's like the head of marketing for Levi's. And he's like, oh, hey, Scott, pitch your like Vine idea. And I was like, dude, like give me some sort of heads up. And so I'm like, okay, here's the thing. We're gonna make like magic on Vine in like 6 seconds. And he's like, wait, what are you talking about? I was like, I don't know. I'm like selling a dream. I'm like overwhelmed. But anyways, he liked kind of, ultimately when I could get my thoughts together, kind of liked what I said and ultimately like went up there and had a few meetings and brought in Ian for one of the pitches. And then ultimately we kind of came up with this concept of 40 Viners presented by Levi's. And I remember the first post that we did was he did a series of wearing the Levi's like 49ers jacket and the helmet, and he was jumping uh, various places along the field, and it looked like he was just kind of flying across the field. So that was our first post. And I think like Yahoo Sports wrote like an article and it was like, whoever's running the 49ers Vine account is in all caps, like amazing. And I was like, dude, like this is what happens when you just like kind of see something that's like untouched. Like if everybody's going like this way and you're the first like group organization that goes like kind of another way and like kind of finds this untapped like vertical, like most of the time, like we're doing is like we're talking about access and like, okay, can we get like inside the locker room and like can we put a mic on the head coach and like dude, all these things. And like there's varying degrees, like teams have different levels of access. All those things that like you kind of mentioned from claymation vines or like the roof shots or the mascot or Ludacris, like here in Atlanta, like none of those had anything to do with access. Like we just created like stuff that was amazing, right? Like by like looking at it from like a different point of view. And like all the credit on the roof shot, like our senior director of production, his name's Austin Hiddle. I'll give him a little crap because he was written about in the Wall Street Journal, for his roof shots and he's a big deal. But anyways, one, it's terrifying to go up there and shoot from where he shoots. Absolutely terrifying. And so to be able to go up to the ledge of the stadium above the halo board there and to be able to kind of shoot that from that perspective. And then that's not it, but to be able to then motion track everything, add sound and kind of that immersive audio experience that kind of like almost makes it feel like video game or it doesn't feel real almost. Like that changed that kind of like so many different teams went up there and hey, can we do this in our stadium? We have a dome. Like, where are catwalks? Like, how high can we get? And that was like really cool to see like the movement that like that started. That had nothing to do with me, by the way. But there are just these different ways. Like, don't get upset with access or the fact that like one team can do something else that you can't. Like, I don't know, what's your competitive advantage? Like, what can you do that's just like great storytelling or like making art or like those types of things that can kind of just speak to a different community. Like the Freddie Falcon stunt video has like 10 million views on like YouTube shorts. Like it's just like it's insane. And I'm like, why did this like blow up this much, and specifically on this platform versus the other platform. Like, look, like our fans care about more than just sports. Like, how do you appeal to like even a wider audience that just loves it for the content that it is, and it really like kind of transcends the logo on the uniform? Um, I think that that's what's really cool, and what always kind of excites me about kind of finding like the what's next.
Yeah. No, it's so cool to hear. Like I've always preached like any limitation is just an opportunity to be creative. Like you're never gonna like every team is not structured the same. Like you said, from the top down, no matter what it is, like buy-in is different, the support is different, the staffing's different, like just the goals of the organizations are different. So it's like, just like you said, what sets you apart from everybody else and lean into that. And the other thing is being brave enough to not do what the other, 31 teams or 29 teams are doing. It's like that's one thing I think, I've gotten stuck in the past and other places I've been and other places I've heard from is like you get stuck in the, well, we did this and it worked, so let's stick with it. Let's keep doing it because it's comfortable. We know what we're expecting. Like it's nothing you have to pitch and go through the process and
Hmm.
think and brainstorm. It's just like we don't have enough time, this works, let's do that. So then it's like it gets into the, one having the courage to be able to step outside the box and go with it. And, for good or for bad, because, for every, 40 Viners video that went out that was a success, there's 100 other things that get posted that weren't. And, there's so many things that I've worked on in the past where it's like they were huge and amazing, and I'm so proud of them. And the others that weren't as huge and amazing, it doesn't make me any less proud. It's just they didn't work as well as you'd hoped, or they
Hmm.
didn't hit that same chord. But it's just looking back, it's definitely interesting of
Yeah.
the attributes and the things that you need to be able to be creative. It's not
Hmm.
just thinking of the great idea. It's putting a plan in place. It's having the courage to step out of the box. It's all these different things that you really don't think of.
Yeah, and I think to your point about just kind of like what you see from other teams, like, and I mean this respectfully, like I try not to like only look at like sports teams. Um, I think one of the places that I've always kind of gotten like the biggest inspiration is like literally from other creators. Um, we worked some of the Freddy stunts and the Ludacris video. That was a guy named AJ Sistrom who came out here, was part of a video crew we worked with week one to do kind of the Sundays kind of video edit. And so we're like, hey, Freddie's jumping from the roof. And so many teams have kind of tried to do this. And I was like, how do we do? Can we do this with like a 360 cam? Can we like Oh yeah, actually he does like 360 video for Puma and Cobra. And so I was like, dude, this would be and so working through kind of the logistics with him, and then I'm like down in the mascot locker room, and we're like trying to figure out like equipment and like hooking it up to Freddie, and like, okay, let's like hope this goes well. We've never totally done this before. And then I heard when that kind of like blew up, some of the other mascots were like texting Freddie, saying how they're like, dude, we've done these stunts for a while, but like this one like took off. And it's just, okay, yeah, well, we worked with somebody who is really, really good at doing that specifically, and that makes you better. And so just being able to utilize like those resources, working with Ian, we were actually out at the Shorty Awards. I think it was the last year that they had best use of Vine as a category. And so we just joked around. We were like, well, we closed it out. Okay. But it was just kind of fun just to meet all of his creator friends and people that he had worked with or heard of or seen online. And that's how we were introduced to a guy named Evan Garber, who at the time he was doing a bunch of drawings on Snapchat, but he was only using his finger. And so he would take a photo and then it'd be like, okay, here's this cool photo of Zach. Okay, well now he's an astronaut and he's in outer space. And so we called it Skull Scribbles. And ultimately like sold that campaign. And so then we started doing that on Snapchat, kind of expanded it to Instagram. And funny how things turn out. Delta was a partner for the Vikings on that series, kind of around the time that I left. And so Delta's also a partner in Atlanta. And so Atlanta actually told our branded digital partnerships folks who are kind of on my team and with AMBSC, they were like, hey, well, we do this deal with the Vikings. Like, do you think we could do this for Atlanta United? So he's like, hey, Scott, you did this in Minnesota, right? I'm like, dude, this is awesome. I'm so glad that Delta's in. And I was like, hey, Evan, can we kind of like reheat this? And then how do we kind of take that same concept and transition it for Atlanta United? But like all those were just like, creators and people who are wildly more talented than I am. And just being able to kind of try new things and be a little bit different and kind of take some risks. And I don't know, that's fun. Like, I still really like, you know, back to what we were talking about earlier, like kind of doing the work. I still really like doing the work. So it's like when I had to go up in the rafters with Freddie, as he was dressed with Santa Claus and like stand up there and like I'm terrified of heights, by the way. So this was not hands were sweating and it's like the real deal up there in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. But like to be able to do that and then turn around with our video production crew at MBS and to be able to kind of edit that and turn that around and then be able to kind of do that a little bit more self-sufficiently, was great. But we're always on the big ones. I think I'm going to call AJ and make sure he gets out there so we can kind of like, okay, now what do we do? We're already talking about like, how do we take that to like the next level next year? What does like 2.0 look like?
Yeah. No, that's so cool, man. Let me change gears a little bit, and I kind of want to go into one of the big things with this podcast is helping, the next generation with not only all of this advice that I hope is helpful to them because it's been helpful to me to say the least, but like more specifically, we talked about people taking that next step into leadership. Well, how about the people who are kind of taking that first step or trying to get in the door? What, as a hiring manager that has hired people in multiple stops, what is, that one piece of advice or, whatever the advice might be for, that college kid who is looking for that first job? How does he get his foot in the door? How does he stand out in the process?
Um, Probably two pieces of advice. First, like do everything when you're in school. Like literally everything. Like try all the things, do all the things because you don't know kind of which direction that your career may take you. But the more versatile you are early on, the more indispensable you will be. So in order to be able to like one, then get your foot in the door, but then be able to stay, you want your employer to be like, man, like I cannot imagine this place without Zach. And like once they get there, like now you can kind of start to build. And then ultimately then you can start to be able to like specialize. But I think one of the things that's always benefited me and like I tell my team, like I've done most of the jobs on our team at one point or another in my career, whether it's writing for the site or, manning a camera in the studio. You know what I mean? Like I've done a little bit of everything. And then the other piece of advice is just to be persistent. I think people are always very cognizant of not like annoying Zach, right? Like I've sent in, my email. Okay, like do I email him? Oh, I haven't heard back. Or like I just had one call. Do I bug them again? Like, oh no, it's too early. You know how busy people are in sports? Like, honestly, like they might have forgotten. Maybe they had, I don't think it's a bad thing. Like, if somebody emails me like once a week, like during the process, like I'm fine with that. It's another email like in my inbox. Like, I might not respond every time because I might not have an update for you, but at least like we're kind of staying, at least kind of we're staying top of mind. And so I think that that's really, really important.
For sure. Well, yeah. So I guess like when you, as a hiring manager, are looking for that next person, like, you talked about building your team, in Atlanta, finding people and filling roles in Minnesota. Like, is there something specific? And I know it changes with every different role because they're so different, but is there one quality that you're consistently looking for when you're in that process?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, it's kind of hard to like forecast, but ultimately somebody who is going to make themselves or make other people around them better. Like I don't want somebody who's not that I don't want the person who's kind of the most talented, but like I'm ultimately going to take the person who's kind of the best culture fit for our group, that we can kind of envision that seat and ultimately kind of push us in directions and might have strengths that are a little bit different from our current strengths. Somebody that can kind of build on and kind of be additive there. Um, and somebody who's going to be a little bit persistent and like um, the ability to be able to make something happen, right? Like to persist and find a way like, okay, hey, I don't have budget, I don't have this, or I don't have that, or like this is an issue. But you're gonna figure it out. Um, I think that those are like people who can kind of outkick their coverage in terms of their talent just because of their work ethic, is really, really important.
For sure. Well, cool, man. Honestly, I can't thank you enough. I couple little quick hitters that I have that are just goofy questions to shut it down, but honestly, like I've learned so much, and I know anyone who's listening is going to learn a lot from this. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I appreciate you having me on.
Definitely. Well, all right. So answer these as quickly or slowly as you would like. But so the first one, what is your least favorite industry buzzword?
Ladder up.
Parks and Rec or The Office?
Ooh, that's really tough. Um, Maybe I don't know, Parks and Rec, maybe. Like Ron Swanson is phenomenal. Like I
That's my
think
guy.
I kind of go there because I feel like Ron Swanson's kind of like my spirit animal in some ways, like he wants to have a little bit of whiskey and like a nice steak and sometimes like I don't know, I can't fault a man for that, I guess.
For sure. That I mean, honestly, like my brain makes things so complicated that I think I gravitate to him where it's like he knows what he's doing, he knows what's important to him. Everything is so kind of simple and by the book. And that like honestly, it that's why this podcast is called Very Good Social Media, is
Mhm.
because last season of Parks and Rec, he changes, like he has his building company. It's just called Very Good Building Company. And that's literally where I came up with the name.
Oh, I love it.
Friends or Seinfeld?
Probably Friends. Like Seinfeld though, more of a Friends guy.
Yeah. These are all like I'm so right in the middle on all of them. Parks and Rec though, that's my show. But all these other ones, it's like kind of in the middle.
Hmm.
Cool Ranch or nacho cheese?
Dude, these are hard. These are the hardest questions you've asked me all at Cool Ranch.
TikTok, Reels or Shorts?
Reels.
X or Threads?
I still don't call it X. I
It's
just
so
like
hard.
I can't bring myself to that at all. So I'll say Twitter between the three of them.
There you go. Google Plus or IGTV?
Um, IGTV was a good time. It just kind of like evolved. It didn't like kind of go away. Kind of like worked itself into Reels over time.
Yeah. I think I know the answer to this one. Vine or MySpace?
Oh, 1,000 Divine above everything.
I figured I knew that one without even asking. And then the last one, rate the finale of Game of Thrones from 1 to 10.
Um, Okay, so some people had a problem. I guess I didn't really necessarily have a problem with Game of Thrones. So like not the greatest, but not the worst. Like a six, maybe. Like better than average.
That
Is that okay?
that's
Is that an
that
okay answer?
that everyone hates on it so bad, and I'm sure we're both in kind of the minority here, but like I'm the same way. Like I enjoyed the show, but I so much more enjoyed the experience of like that's the closest thing that I've ever been a part of that was like a sports event, because it was like
Hmm.
every Sunday the whole world was watching this thing, and it was so cool to be, on social and seeing all of like the comments and things that went back and forth. So it was like I think I enjoyed it more from just like the experience, but like yeah, I mean, I would have probably ended it differently. I'm sure everyone else would
Hmm.
have, but like, I can't say that I hated it.
Yeah. Sopranos finale though, 10 out of 10.
There you go. Well, have you ever seen the show Lost?
Yes, and
from way back
I
when.
just stopped watching it after a while. Like the last season, I was so confused. I didn't know which way was up.
Yep.
I felt like they just started going without kind of an ending in mind and then had to piece everything together. It was one of my favorite shows that then quickly became one of my least favorite shows of all time. Way too much time invested in Lost.
Yes, exactly. So anyone who tells me that Game of Thrones, like the finale is like a two, like watch Lost and tell me like that's not a two, and it'll probably
I've
change your
seen
opinion.
worse.
Yes, I've definitely seen worse, but well, cool, man. I honestly, I can't thank you enough. I'll definitely be hitting you up more for some advice down the road, but this has been a huge episode, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, let's stay in touch, my friend. This was really good. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Definitely. Yeah, my pleasure. And thank you all for watching, listening, wherever it is. Catch us every Monday at noon Eastern time. This has been a very good social media podcast, and we'll see you next time.